firstly, I really enjoyed Wrath of Man. I thought it was good.
I enjoyed making it.
Yeah, good fun. I mean, obviously, I'm going to speak to you about, sort of your career and sort of things you've got coming up and stuff, but with a focus on that because it's kind of the next big project. So I mean, I'm just wondering, there's many reasons I'm sure why you'd want to get involved in a project like that. But what was it about this this part in this project that made you think, yeah, that's going to be my next one?
I really like Guy Ritchie films, and so there was that element of it. I also like the type of films that I like action films, and I like popcorn films, if you like. Other actors might have a very worthy film as their favourite, but mine is Top Gun. So and the Expendables and all those sorts of things. So I like those types of films. So it had Guy Ritchie, and it also had that element of kind of switch your brain off type action stuff that I thought was really pretty cool. So
yeah, because I mean, Guy Ritchie's films are always like very distinctively his. You always know when you're watching a Guy Ritchie film. Was it quite a distinctive and unique experience working with him? Could you now say, oh, you always know when you're working on a Guy Ritchie film? Is it kind of a similar thing?
I would say so. I would say definitely. The first thing he said to me with the other guys was, if I see you acting, you're getting sacked. That was our first day. And he walks on set and he makes things on set. Like he'll have a writer. Marn will be sitting there on the keyboard while you're, doing things or working stuff out. And he'll come in and he doesn't even say your dialogue. He just says, rhubarb, rhubarb, rhubarb. You're doing rhubarb, rhubarb, rhubarb. You're doing this, 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 and this. He's a million miles an hour. But he's lovely. He's really good. Sometimes you get a script from him the night before. Sometimes you actually get a script a half hour before you start filming on that day that's completely different to the script that you agreed to and that you signed up for. So you either get to grips with that and embrace it, or I would imagine you would have a real nightmare of a time.
Is that one of the kind of joys of acting, is constantly like adapting to different directors and different ways people work?
I really like it. I really like working in the moment. I like finding things and making them real based on how you get there. A lot of the time, especially when you're coming up through the ranks and you're doing smaller parts, you're expected to hit the ground running, and you know your lines, you've imagined what it might be, and you're expected to hit the ground running. And part of being successful is also being adaptable and working with maybe some more established talent that's there. And so I really do like working in that way, in that kind of intuitive way. I like it. Some people don't, but I enjoy it.
And then you mentioned the kind of how sort of it's quite fast-paced Wrath of Man. I mean, as an audience member, it's one of those films that's kind of unrelenting, just intense, just kind of proper popcorn cinema, like you said. Was the shoot quite fast-paced to match the pacing of the story being told?
For a film, it was. Yeah, I mean, for a series, things obviously a soap film's really fast, and a series film's differently. And a film, you generally get a lot of time. So there was a lot of consideration from Guy's point of view about what we would do, and he would put a lot of training our way as well. So there would be advisors and people taking us away when he wasn't burning film, doing our thing and making sure that we were ready when he got there. But when he's there, he does work in the moment really, really quite quickly. It's great. Sometimes he's worked it out before you even get there. Other times you're finding it together. It does work quite fast, I would say. Yeah.
And you were speaking about sort of liking films like Top Gun and sort of the Expendables and stuff. I reckon you could make quite a good Expendable if they bring that back again.
I don't know about that. I'm getting a bit long in the tooth actually. I'm about 43 now, but I suppose a lot of the Expendables are quite old if they would have me. Definitely, Jason Statham's an Expendable, so maybe he'll let me.
Yeah. Did you quite enjoy those kind of the roles that require a bit of kind of the physical side of things? I know, obviously, I was reading about a bit of your background and some of the characters you played. There's a kind of a mixture, isn't there, of some of the kind of you look at the Last Post and you get films that really require lots of kind of nuance and character driven, but then there are some films where it does rely on a bit of muscle. Do you quite enjoy kind of the mixture of the two and doing both types of movie?
I would really like to do the more. I would like to do the more emotional stuff, because I think I'm set up to offer more of that, but I do keep getting cast as your soldier type character, or your thug type character, or whatever. And and that's good as well, because you know, there's always that to fall back on, if you like, and a lot of people want that. But I do think I would like to kind of stretch myself in the way I've done in theatre into something a wee bit more, a bit more emotion, with a bit more emotional range in the film and TV world. But hopefully that'll come.
I mean, I was looking at your background. You came into acting quite late. What was it that made you think one day, well, not one day, not that it was this kind of like light bulb moment, but I mean, was this something that was bubbling for a while? This kind of idea of maybe one day, you know, changing professions and getting into the arts and into creativity.
Do you know, it was a light bulb moment. It actually was a light bulb moment. I used to run a homeless unit for people with various different issues, and I was spending an awful lot of time in the place. More time than was healthy, and I decided that I wanted to find a hobby that was creative. I used to paint and draw. I did some acting when I was in school, but I never really paid any attention to it. It wasn't like my calling or whatever. And I found this amateur dramatics company in Glasgow, and it was all singing and dancing and doing musicals, basically things like, I don't know, Oliver or Oklahoma, or, you know, some, you know, whatever. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I decided to start kind of, I don't know whether I decided to start being an actor at that point, but I was definitely interested in it. So I started to work with improvisation companies. I worked backstage with Scottish Opera and Scottish Ballet, building sets. And my opportunity really came when there was a show leaving Chichester Festival Theatre, Hobson's Choice, and they were looking for someone to understudy some of the leading roles, but they were also looking for someone to build the set. And because I'd done the building work and, you know, worked with the amateur theatre companies, I kind of had cobbled together my own little skill set, and I phoned them up and they gave me the job. So at that point, I passed through Cardiff and the Royal Welsh College, and I decided that I wanted to formalise my training, and that's age 30. That's when that happened.
Yeah. Because I'm sort of getting into kind of theatre. I mean, I'm sure there's probably quite a lot of men that harbour similar ambitions to do that. Perhaps feel maybe it's not a feasible path for them, or maybe they're even, you know, say you're working in scaffolding, and some men might feel like they can't admit to their colleagues they want to pursue song and dance. But are you very much of the kind of mindset of just encouraging people just to do their thing and to follow their dreams? Because it's really worked out for you. So.
Even more than following your dreams, it's a real healing process, because if you've had any sort of past where you've failed to be able to express yourself, or you maybe don't have the emotional tools to make sense of your situations or environment, any kind of creative outlet makes sense of that. You know, if life hurts, art heals, and art, whatever artistic outlet you have, it enables you to try and process, make sense. People use words like catharsis. I think art is a really healthy outlet to explore all the things that have gone on in your life, and all the things that might be going on in other people's lives. That it's a healthy process, I think. It certainly is for me anyway.
Do you think in some ways, you sort of mentioned about working at the kind of homeless shelter and stuff, that I often find acting is born often out of curiosity, and it's if you've obviously met so many different people from different walks of life, is that curiosity something that you think took you into acting? Because acting is putting on different masks, isn't it? It's playing different people and getting into the headspace of such a different sort of variety of human beings.
Definitely, there's a lot of there's a lot of shortcuts to any kind of research that I can bypass because of the characters I met, as well as running that homeless unit. I grew up in it since age 10, so the amount of people that I met going through that system, going through that environment, and you could number them in the hundreds. Really interesting characters, sometimes at the brink of their desperation, or seeing them get out of that, seeing them triumph and seeing them move on and make something of their life. All of these things tie in as a character study, but also emotionally. Whenever you're using those emotional memories, you can see how people were affected by it. You can relate to your own situation and when you might have felt similarly, and you can apply it to the different characters that you're asked to study. It's a real tool for the homework and the process that you need to go through in order to go and work on set by intuition, knowing the character very well, having done your research, being able to react in that space as a part of yourself as well, but also hopefully as you think the character might be. It's invaluable. It's a real privilege, actually.
And we sort of mentioned at the beginning, you're sort of in Glasgow, because I've read some of that you had lived in London. I'm not sure if that was right or not, but I just wondered,
yeah.
moving back to Scotland? Is that because I guess there's such great stuff coming out of Scotland at the moment. There's great things are being shot there a lot. There's some good TV. There's some good films. Because I guess at one point there's probably this idea. Well, I've got to go to London to be an actor, but it's not the case now, is it? Really? That's quite old. Yeah.
It's not the case. It helps. It does help. I think the 8 years that I spent in London were valuable. I came back to Glasgow out of necessity. I look after my mum. She's elderly now and she got sick, and so she now lives with me, or we live together. That's what we say. I'm actually building a bungalow out the back for her just now. Where I was, before I came on to you, I was knee deep in poo. I'm building the drains today. So I was out of necessity. But in saying that, anyone who is now looking at maybe trying to become an actor, or who has come out of drama school, they don't necessarily have to live in London anymore. And I think that's a great thing, because self-tapes that you can control, and you can go up and down in the train. That's expensive, but needs must. But you don't have to live in London anymore. It did help me, and I did enjoy London for the 8 years that I was there. But you don't have to be there. No, definitely not.
So I'm looking at what you've got kind of coming up. I know you're in sort of Slow Horses, which is based on the brilliant. The books are great, and there's Nick Duffy. Is that right? Is that who you got?
Nick Duffy, yeah.
So obviously you're close to Taverna and stuff like that. It's a good role. What was the attraction to that project and that character? Because he's got the kind of he's a bit of muscle in there, but there's something going on with Nick, I always think.
Well, there definitely is. And what I don't know if we'll ever find out exactly what that is, but the Duffy that I play is very different to the Duffy in the books. In a couple of ways. I can't talk too much about it. They won't let me talk about it. That's the thing. Apple are very, very strict about what they want to talk about and how they promote things, which is completely up to them. But it's been a huge amount of fun. Both the people I've been working with, that you'll have done your research and you'll know exactly who that is, and also in the amount of stuff that I've got to do, the stunts and the running around and all that boys' own stuff. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I know you obviously can't give too much away about the character or the stories and stuff like that, but what was it like sort of working alongside people like Kristin, Scott Thomas, and Gary Oldman? I mean, that's in this profession, it's no matter how old and how experienced anyone is and what they've been doing, I guess you can always learn, can't you, from working with people like that?
Well, they say never meet your heroes. Gary Oldman for me is he's just a special actor, and having met him, he's a pretty special person as well. Not in a lovey actory type of way. We've probably only spoken in character. Weirdly, this is going to sound terrible, but I keep an element of my character in the workplace, and I think he might be doing the same thing. I think that's why we kind of gel and seem to get on quite well. But he also gives you a bit of an insight into his home life sometimes, and he does photography that's a kind of really old process, and so he talks about that. But he's got Gary Oldman has got the sharpest instinct of any actor I've ever worked with in my life. He's beautiful to work with. I've enjoyed it so much. I've tried not to gush about that in front of him because it kind of breaks a bit of the magic, but I've really, really enjoyed working with him, hearing about his life, and also hearing his feedback, which he's been kind enough to pass on to me about work that I've done that he's seen that we haven't been working on in the same scene together. So it's been a fantastic experience. It really has. And Kristin's lovely as well. I worked closely with Kristin in the character. She's lovely. Freddie Fox, I'm working closely with him, and he's brilliant as well. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it sounds like Gary's a great collaborator on that front. But does it get normal? Well, because when you come to this slightly, I guess if you went to drama school and you're like 16 or 17 and your mind's always on acting, meeting and starring alongside kind of faces that you sort of grew up watching and know really well is probably something that you kind of already accustomed to from a young age. But as you kind of came to it quite late, does it still feel a bit surreal when you're just standing in a room with someone like Gary Oldman? Because I guess there was a point when you probably would have just gone to the cinema to watch one of his movies when you were just not doing anything to do with your current job. So it must be quite strange to then be someone that you've seen on posters and movies and Oscars and stuff like that. And next thing you know, you're kind of sharing a stage. Does it get normal at all?
It does. It does. I went to drama school when I was 30, so I was there with a lot of younger people, and that was really great as well. But it does. It kind of has to, because you want to be there as a support for everyone, and that includes even people who are stars, if you like. And so in order to be a support to them, I think you have to try and make it as normal as possible. In order to work, you have to find a parity. As much as they might want or not want, but you know, it would be weird if I was to turn up and be very different and very gushy. It would be weird for them, and that would be the last thing I would want. It wouldn't serve me either.
And they're talking of getting used to stuff. Have you got used to seeing yourself on screen yet? I mean, you've got quite a lot of credits to your name with some really kind of high profile stuff, but maybe if you're at home and you flip the channels and there's something on, or you sort of watch something at a cast and crew, does that bit ever get normal? Is that always, because I think I can't even watch my Zoom interviews back. I can't even look at my own face. So never mind seeing myself on a big cinema screen.
It does get normal. It does. You become very critical of yourself, and you become very analytical. But it kind of gets, you kind of get used to it. It's like the first time you hear your voice. I remember when I was a kid, about 8, you had a little tape recorder, and I heard my voice back, and I thought, that's not my voice. I think it's probably something similar, that you just get used to it. You get used to it, and I don't know, sometimes it does seem weird, the odd things that you're doing, or you'll notice something that you did and you think, I don't really like that anymore, or whatever. But it does get normal.
So finally, really, I was going to ask you, because I was looking up at some of the other stuff you've been in Game of Thrones. You got one of the rare kind of people that played 2 characters. You played a Stark and a Lannister, is that right?
I did. That was weird.
Yeah.
David Benioff and Dan Weiss, they were there the day. They weren't directing the day that I did my first job on Game of Thrones. I just left. I quite soon left drama school. Game of Thrones was something me and my friend Anthony used to sit and watch, like, we'd get so head up. So the first season for us was like amazing. And then I got the call. It was Robert Stern, I think, that cast me in it, who's I've worked with 6 times or something now. Or what, 6 times or something now. But I was cast in Game of Thrones, and I did the day or the couple of days that I was doing. And David Benioff and Dan Weiss were very complimentary about the way I died. They said we didn't need to cut round you, and you know, for a day player, that's something I think they were surprised about. So they said, we'll get you back, and I said, but you've killed me. But true enough, in the first episode of season 4, they brought me back to play a different character, and it was someone who was getting their hand stabbed, and again, it was a difficult death and something they maybe didn't want to cut around. So maybe I was their go-to die guy. I don't know.
Well, you're not the only person in Game of Thrones to have died and come back, although maybe not.
I thought I was. Really, that's cool.
No. I mean, you're the only actor in terms of play 2 characters. I just mean that there was I say it's a spoiler, everyone knows, but obviously when Jon Snow gets killed and comes back to life, that's what I meant.
Oh, yeah. I stopped watching it when I stopped being in it.
Get that far, I've just ruined something for you. So, but no, that is pretty amazing to have been a Stark and a Lannister. Not many people can boast that. But finally, really, I was just going to ask then, what's the kind of, there's been a couple of tough years, I guess, with COVID and stuff, and there was a real pause in the industry. But are you, things like the theatre are slowly coming back and projects are slowly sort of underway. How's your kind of next couple of years like looking? Do you feel like the work's kind of coming back and you're quite excited about the near future?
I'm excited about Embankment and what that will do. I really think it's a great show, and I've seen a lot of it, and I think it's amazing. So I'm excited about that, what that will do. I'm excited to do some theatre, maybe middle of next year sometime. I'd love to think about that and get back to, because a year doing very little has been hugely. There's been an atrophy in the acting muscle, if you like, and I want to get back into learning and working in the immediate environment of theatre and doing that. So I'd love to do a play in the next year or so. I've started my own production company with a couple of writers, and we've got a couple of projects that have been picked up. So there may be something for me in that as well. I don't know. Well, there is, but I would say anything about it. And yeah, so we're looking to try and expand that emotional range, I think, more than just playing tough guys or action-y type guys. I'm not sure how long I can hold out in that type of, the diet, and I'm a terrible fatty, and I just want to eat. So maybe I'd rather do some heavier, more emotional characters. I don't know, but there's a definite plan for the next couple of years, and it's mostly around extending my range and maybe going back and doing a little bit of theatre, but also concentrating on the film and the TV side, and whatever is happening with Embankment, because that's pretty exciting.
Oh, brilliant! Well, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you today, Chris. And I really do hope we get to see you in some more kind of meatier, kind of emotionally driven roles, because it'd be great to see. I mean, obviously, I think you still bring that to your characters anyway. I think it doesn't matter if they might seem like muscle on the outside, but I think it'd be good to see a character where that's more the focal point for sure. Yeah, so fingers crossed. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey!